I gifted my in-laws a $1 million mansion when I arrived for the anniversary. My wife's boss was there with a realtor. We're getting it appraised, my wife said, for the divorce settlement. I pulled out the deed. Her father saw name on it and went pale. Her boss was in their living room, not seated, not social, standing, arms crossed, next to a woman in heels who held a folder thicker than the anniversary cake. I hadn't even taken off my shoes yet. "Oh, good, you're here," my wife said, waving a hand like I was late for rehearsal. "We're just getting the place appraised." I looked at her, then the man beside her. I didn't need to ask what for. She didn't even flinch when she said it. "For the divorce settlement." You know, when someone tells you something so casually it's clear they've rehearsed it 100 times in the mirror. That was her tone. Not angry, not emotional, just tiredly triumphant. I didn't respond, not verbally. I simply reached into my jacket, pulled out a folder, and placed it on the marble countertop. My father-in-law, who'd been hovering awkwardly near the kitchen, stepped forward like a man approaching a cliff's edge. He opened it, saw the page, then looked again. You ever watch a man's soul retreat behind his eyes? His lips moved, but no words came. His hand trembled slightly as he adjusted his glasses, the ones he only used when looking over contracts or his daughter's more expensive mistakes. Because there at the top of the deed was my name, only my name. Clean, unencumbered, not coned, not gifted, not marital property. His wife was halfway down the hallway calling to someone about champagne. The realtor had gone silent. Her boss, the confident one in the room a minute ago, started flipping through his own folder like a man realizing the test had a back page he'd never studied for. No one touched the cake. And here's the part that gets me. I didn't come here to make a scene. I came with a bottle of wine, ready to raise a glass. This was their 41st anniversary. Technically, their 40th had been last fall when I gave them this house. Not rented, not mortgaged, paid in cash, no balloon payments, no trick language, just a clean gift, or so I'd let them believe. The silence dragged on like a slow bleed. My wife looked at me like I'd kicked over her birthday balloons. "You blindsided me," she finally said, voice trembling with just enough emotion to perform for the room. "I know," I said. "Funny how that feels, huh? But those taps, they actually keep this whole thing alive." Back to the room. Her boss leaned toward me, trying to keep his tone diplomatic. "This changes things." I nodded. "So I've heard." My wife stared at me, blinking. "You told them it was theirs. You said it was for the family." I turned to her, slow and cold. "And you said a lot of things too, like how this place made you finally proud to be part of something real, like how they deserve to feel safe, like how we were a team. You wore that mask so well." I almost believed it. Almost her jaw twitched, but she said nothing. She couldn't. The realtor quietly zipped up her folder and made for the door like someone excusing herself from a hostage situation. No one tried to stop her. The boss gave my wife a glance. Just one. Said everything. This isn't what I signed up for. And yet it was because the house wasn't hers, never had been. She'd paraded it around like a prize, flaunted it at parties, posted shots of her parents, laughing on the porch swing like they'd earned it, but she never read the paperwork, never asked about the structure, never once questioned why the utilities were always routed through my LLC, because she never saw me coming. Not really. She thought I was just the boring one, the safe bet, the guy who'd sold his software company and didn't buy a Porsche, who still wore Costco socks and didn't care about vacation photos. A man like that couldn't possibly be capable of revenge. She was right. I wasn't interested in revenge. I was interested in ownership, and today was the day she realized the difference. 14 months earlier, she pitched it like a Hallmark movie. "We should do something big this year," she said one evening, wine in hand, scrolling through home listings like she was flipping through wedding dresses. "It's their 40th anniversary. They've done so much for us." I didn't laugh, though I should have. Her parents had done a lot. Sure, if you counted passive judgment, snide comments about my low-key lifestyle, and a constant comparison to her sister's plastic surgeon husband, but she was glowing, nostalgic, and I've always been a sucker for her smiles, even the practiced ones. "I was thinking we buy them a place," she said. "You know, a real gift, mortgage, something they can retire into." I paused. "You mean, I buy them a place?" She waved her hand. "Come on, don't be like that. It wasn't a fight, not yet. I just finished the sale of my second company, a small but profitable exit from a cloud security tool I'd built in a guest bedroom. The wires had cleared. Our accounts were full. I was sitting on enough after-tax liquidity to buy 5 houses. But the problem wasn't the money. It was the narrative. So I agreed. On one condition: the deed stays in my name for now until I finalize estate planning with Daniel. She rolled her eyes but didn't argue. "Fine. Technicality. It's still theirs in spirit." There's that word again. Spirit. The one people reach for when they want you to ignore the legal. We found a house in 3 days. A newer build. Single level, wide windows, just outside the city. She cried when the papers were signed. Her mother brought over pipe. Her father shook my hand with 2 hands, the way guilty men do when they're thanking someone they plan to betray. We moved them in before Christmas, and for 13 months I let them live in the fantasy. Let them host their bridge club and talk about their pool. Let them believe generosity equals gullibility because I needed them to feel safe. See, people like my wife, people who treat marriage like a contract with flexible clauses, they only slip when they think the game is already won. So I kept the cameras off, said yes to everything, signed the checks, took the photos, played the part, and slowly they stopped looking over their shoulder. Until today, back in the present, her boss stood frozen in front of the countertop, staring at the legal folder like it had teeth. The realtor, clearly not new to awkward scenes, began packing up her binder without a word. One glance at the name on the deed was enough to tell her the appraisal wasn't just premature, it was fraudulent. This, he said, finally, clearing his throat, changes things. I tilted my head. That's the consensus. He looked at my wife. She didn't look back. Instead, she locked her gaze on the document like sheer willpower might make the ink rearrange itself. Her lips parted. She wanted to say something, needed to probably, but nothing came out because she knew what came next. Knew this was no longer about surprise. This was a pivot point. She'd assumed control. Assumed the optics alone. Happy in-laws, smiling wife, a man who stayed quiet, would carry her through. That no one would question the next steps once she introduced words like divorce, settlement, and community property. But here's the thing. When you've built something from scratch, sleepless nights, code stress ulcers, and 1,000 silent sacrifices, you don't just hand over the keys to someone who thinks emotional labor counts as equity. She assumed this was a chess game. What she didn't realize was I'd already taken her queen and I did it by playing pawn. Quiet, predictable, disposable until now. Now the silence wasn't mine. It was hers. And her father, the man who once scoffed when I ordered mid-tier wine at dinner, he was still standing by the island, one hand on the deed, one on the counter, like bracing himself for a hurricane. He couldn't stop. He knew they all did. They'd been living in a house that wasn't theirs. A gift, yes, but only if you believe in fairy tales. Legally it was mine, and soon everything else she touched would be as well. The champagne flute sat untouched on the dining table, their golden bubbles slowly fading into silence. Shrimp cocktail, sweating on porcelain, roast sea base, chilled now, untouched under its silver dome. A cake with 241 more piped in shaky cursive sat scented like some grotesque joke because no one had the appetite for celebration anymore. Her mother had retreated upstairs within minutes of seeing the deed. Something about a migraine. Her father followed, not even attempting an excuse. He clutched the folder like it was radioactive, like proximity to it might implicate him further. Her boss was more subtle. One quick glance at the room, at the suddenly awkward silence, the champagne nobody was raising, and he slipped out without a goodbye. No firm handshake. No we'll be in touch. Just the quiet retreat of a man who suddenly remembered a better appointment elsewhere. I stood near the fireplace, watching the door shut behind him, and then quietly, but not quietly enough, heard the tap-tapped up of her heels in the hall. She cornered me just as I turned the corner toward the study. Her voice snapped like a whip. You blindsided me. I met her eyes. No, I said I protected what I built. Her eyes narrowed, her jaw tightening. Don't do that. Don't act like this is some righteous crusade. You gifted them that house. That was the spirit of it. Everyone knew what it meant. The spirit, I repeated slowly like I was tasting a foreign word doesn't hold up in court. I let the silence settle. She hated silence, always filled it with noise. Opinions, fake laughter, petty distractions, but now her words were running dry. She was trying to find her footing again, trying to slip into the role she always defaulted to when things didn't go her way. Misunderstood wife, betrayed by a cold husband. You waited, she hissed. You set this up, you let us think. I didn't let anyone do anything. I cut in. Voice still, even you assumed there's a difference. Her face twitched. Anger, yes, but also something deeper, panic. Not because of the house itself, but because the narrative was collapsing and she had no new one to pivot to. She looked down the hallway toward where the front door had just closed behind her boss, and something clicked. Her fallback plan, whatever fantasy she'd been peddling about this new life they'd built, the assets they'd split, were slipping through her fingers because the house wasn't hers. The tax filings weren't hers. The legal leverage she thought she had gone. You really think this makes you the bigger person? She snapped. No, I said deadpan. It makes me the legal owner. She laughed bitterly, but it came out cracked. You think this is some kind of win? No, I said again. This is insurance. She looked at me like she didn't recognize the man in front of her. Maybe she didn't. Maybe she'd spent so long believing her own projections. That I was passive, mild, the kind of guy who'd be too decent to fight back. That she never considered what kind of man builds a business from scratch and walks away from it with enough to buy her parents a mansion just for peace and quiet. You're going to regret this, she said finally. I already regretted marrying someone who treats loyalty like a limited time offer. That landed. She blinked once, twice, then turned away the way someone does when they realize their last weapon just backfired. I didn't follow her. I went to the dining room, poured a glass of untouched champagne, and toasted the heir to 41 more. No, 2-0 left because the dinner never happened. The celebration turned into an audit, the marriage into an asset freeze. In her plan, whatever twisted mosaic she and her boss had glued together behind closed doors just fractured under one very inconvenient fact. Ownership isn't a feeling, it's paperwork, and mine was ironclad. Her attorney came in hot, young, aggressive, and probably sold on the promise of a clean-cut divorce with a quick payout, the kind of suit that specializes in emotional restitution and spends too much time on Instagram posting pictures of $18 martinis with captions like #winning for McClients. She walked into mediation like she was walking into a spa, full of buzzwords, empowered, assertive, naively armed. And then she opened the folder, not hers, mine, more accurately, the one my legal team had ciphered over the night before with a smile and a paperclip, cream-colored, no branding, just weight, the weight of receipts, details, timelines, inconvenient facts. The first sheet, a notarized record of every transfer related to the house, not just the purchase documents but the wiring instructions from my trust, the LLC disbursement logs and the subsequent tax filings. Page 2. A copy of our prenuptial agreement, specifically Clause 7 bolded and signed, outlining the non-marital status of any property acquired post-exit by personal liquidity. In short, anything I bought with money from selling my company was mine, not joint. Clause 7 wasn't new. She had signed it the same night she cried about how love shouldn't need contracts, then kissed me and called me paranoid. She stopped mentioning it after the honeymoon until now. But that wasn't the kicker. Next was the letter dated 11 months ago on letterhead signed in blue ink by her father, the same man who clutched that deed like a defibrillator now. It was short, 3 sentences: to whom it may concern. The residence at address has been granted for temporary use during our retirement phase. We understand legal ownership resides solely with my name, and we acknowledge no claim of title or value. Signed her father's name. Apparently, gratitude has a paper trail. I made sure of it. The attorney blinked once, then flipped to the final section. I knew which one it was. I had saved it for dessert. 6 months of security logs pulled from the property's smart system. Not just video timestamps but digital access pings, every entry, every device ID, and there it was. Repeated entries during weekday afternoons, usually between 12:45 and 2:30 p.m., always when her parents were out, always marked as an unrecognized device. Manual override, the name tagged to the device. A phone linked to him, her boss, uninvited visits, dozens of them. Her lawyer paused, adjusted her jacket, slowly closed the folder, then looked across the table at my attorney, who hadn't said a single word beyond good morning, and in a voice no longer wrapped in confidence, she asked, "Did your husband set this up?" There was a long, sour pause. I didn't answer because I didn't need to. The woman sitting next to her, the one who'd once promised me we'd always talk things through, was now silent, not stoic, not angry, just quiet in that particular way someone gets when they've just realized they brought a toy sword to a live firing range. Her lawyer waited, tried to meet her gaze. She didn't return it because deep down, even through her pride, even through the crumbling fantasy she'd built around the idea of outmaneuvering me, she knew the truth. None of this was sudden. It wasn't revenge. It was insurance, calculated, documented, dated. See, that's the part they never expect from the quiet ones. The men who let them have the last word. The loud laugh. The Instagram post about their real soulmate. They expect chaos when it crumbles, not folders. And when that folder closes, so does the leverage. The legal ground beneath her, once assumed solid, was now sliding paper by paper, signature by signature, into something much colder, a battlefield, and she'd walked in unarmed. It was nearly midnight when the call came. Her screen lit up with dead, and for a moment, she hesitated, thumb hovering, mind racing. Maybe he was calling to console her, to reassure her that everything would blow over, that they were still a family, and that it was just a misunderstanding. She answered with a sigh already "Hey Dad." His voice cut through like a scalpel, low, controlled, no warmth. "I thought this was just a marriage problem," he said. "But now you've embarrassed me." Silence. Not from shock. She was too wide for that, but because she didn't know where this was going yet, and he didn't give her time to figure it out. "I had my golf buddy call," he continued. "Tax specialist." He looked up the parcel ID. Her breath caught. "You want to guess what name's on the title?" he asked, already knowing she wouldn't. "You said it was ours," she muttered, trying to drag the conversation somewhere sympathetic. "That he gave it." He cut her off. "He gave us nothing. He let us live in it. That's not a gift. That's a courtesy. One you just tried to cash in on without checking the damn receipt." She closed her eyes. "I didn't know." "Don't lie," he snapped, voice rising for the first time. "Don't insult me like that. You never asked questions because you thought he was too soft to say no." "He is manipulative," she said sharply. "He set this up." Her father laughed once, hard, "and you played right into it. You tried to sell a man's gift before the wrapping paper dried. Are you even hearing yourself?" She paced the room, the rhythm of her heels breaking under the weight of his disappointment. "It wasn't about the house. It was about your ego," he said. "You wanted a clean exit and a big headline. You wanted to keep the cake and the credit." She bit her lip. "You don't understand." No, You don't understand. He interrupted, this time slower, sharper. This was supposed to be my retirement dignity, my last address. You took that and wrapped it into your little divorce drama like it was set dressing. Now my name's not on a deed, but it is in the system public attached to your stunt. She didn't reply. Couldn't. In the appraisal, he continued. You brought a realtor into a house you don't own to value something you can't sell in front of your mother, your husband, and your boss, whose name shows up on security logs like he was casing the place. Dad, no, he said. You need to fix this. Quietly, his voice changed then. Something older, something worn, not angry anymore, just tired. You're not a kid. You don't get to tantrum your way out of this one. You need to own what you did. She sat on the edge of the bed, head in her hands. The call was still live. Her father was still there, but the distance between them had never felt wider. You always said you wanted to be respected, he added, almost like an afterthought. Start acting like someone worth respecting. Then the line clicked off. She stared at the blank screen, and for the first time in days, no one was on her side. Her father, retired Marine, spreadsheet obsessed, hyper proud of his legacy, had spoken more disappointment in 2 minutes than he had in her entire life. He didn't yell, he didn't insult, he just described the truth, and it was damning the worst part. He was right. She hadn't just fumbled a marriage. She had turned a gift into a weapon without even bothering to check if it was loaded. She dragged her parents' name, their future, into a ploy for leverage she didn't even have the paperwork to back up. And now even her own father was stepping away from the blast zone. The foundation she thought would always catch her, no matter how far she fell, was beginning to erode, and she hadn't even hit bottom yet. Exactly 7 days after her father's midnight call, a courier showed up outside her apartment with a simple gray envelope. No markings, no sender, no pleasantries. Inside, a slim USB stick. She almost tossed it in the drawer out of spite, assuming it was more paperwork or another passive-aggressive move from his lawyers. But then her phone buzzed. A message from her attorney. We need to talk now. Settlement is on hold. No greeting, no preamble, just panic wearing a suit. She plugged in the USB. A time-stamped folder opened with labeled clips, crisp, high-resolution, quietly devastating. All filmed from subtle angles. No wide shots, no gimmicks. Just clean angles from corners of rooms she never realized were being monitored. And there it was. Guest room camera 3B, April 17th, to 12 p.m. She clicked play. The clip opened with sunlight spilling in through the blinds. She was perched on the edge of the armchair, legs crossed, wine glass in hand. Her boss stood near the window, blazer draped over a chair, laughing softly. Then her own voice, clear as day. Honestly, he's so predictable, she said, swirling her drink. I could tell him I was joining a silent monastery, and he'd nod and say, bring a sweater. He left. She didn't stop. We'll split the house, flip it, and you can take over the expansion project. Easy equity. He won't see a thing until I'm out. Are you sure? Her boss asked. He's sharper than you make him sound. She snorted. No, trust me. He's smart at spreadsheets and VPNs, not people. He only sees what's in front of him. The clip ended. No fade out, no music, just cold silence. She sat frozen, eyes locked on her own face. So casual, so smug, so sure. Her phone rang again. This time she picked up. Her attorney's voice came through, brittle. Why didn't you tell me there were recordings? I didn't know he had audio set up, she said, grasping at some thread of plausible deniability. Her attorney exhaled. He didn't just have audio. He had timestamps labeled, folders cross-referenced with his calendar and your parents' travel schedule. You planned this in his house with his cameras rolling. She opened another clip. Different day, same room, different dress. This time she was on the phone, leaning against the wall. No, I told you he won't fight it. He's not that kind of man. I just need the appraisal done and then I'll file. Worst case, I lose the patio. Best case, he never knew what hit him. Her attorney cut in again. Do you understand what this looks like? I was venting. You were conspiring on tape in a property legally owned by the man you were trying to defraud during a marriage. This isn't just bad optics. This is malicious intent. She stood up, walking in circles now. He said nothing. He let me keep the narrative. He'll let you dig your own grave. Silence. She closed the folder. Her confidence, so freshly shaken by her father, now buckled under something worse. Exposure, not just to lawyers, not just to judges, to herself. Because that laugh, that tone, that version of her, she recognized it. The one who treated him like an ATM that couldn't talk back, who assumed quiet meant weak, who thought a man who didn't yell had no weapons. And now that man didn't have to raise his voice, he just had to hit play. The legal team requested a pause in negotiations. But the truth was, there wasn't going to be a negotiation. Not anymore. The leverage was gone. The strategy was in ruins. Her smug little blueprint had been run through a shredder made of surveillance timestamps and perfectly timed silence. She sat down on the edge of her bed, head in her hands, and watched her own smirk flicker across the screen one last time. It was the expression of someone absolutely certain they were winning, and it looked pathetic now because the one person she thought would never see it coming had never taken his eyes off the door. It didn't take long for the fallout to spill past their marriage and into the boardroom. Her boss, once smug, once cockier enough to waltz into another man's house with a realtor and a grin, was called into his company's compliance office 3 days after the recording surfaced. Not through the usual HR chain, not with the courtesy of a calendar invite. It was an unscheduled meeting. That alone said everything. Because while she had underestimated her husband, he had underestimated paperwork, and in the world her boss moved in, consulting contracts, procurement reviews, strategic acquisitions. Optics were oxygen, and the footage, that was smoke. The compliance officer didn't ask vague questions. They quoted times: April 17th, 2:12 p.m., you're present in a privately owned residence. Were you authorized to be there? He fumbled, said it was social, a friendly visit. They slid a still frame across the table. Him standing by the guest room window, glass of wine in hand, listening to a married woman outline plans to liquidate a property she didn't legally own. Was this conversation part of company strategy? He tried again. It was personal, nothing to do with the company. That was when the audit began. Not just of his visits, of everything. Expense reports, client-side referrals, shared projects, cross-signed real estate ventures. Because once doubt gets a foothold, compliance digs until they hit something, whether it's rot or just poor judgment. And poor judgment has a scent. He didn't call her. He didn't email. He texted, "You need to fix this. I didn't sign up to lose my license over your divorce games." That was the moment it turned. She hadn't just lost the upper hand with her husband. She'd lost her safety net. The man who'd once whispered sweet promises in the guest room was now treating her like a biohazard. He wasn't fighting for her. He was distancing, disinfecting, running a risk assessment in real time. She called him, no answer. She called again, then impulse, desperation, muscle memory. She dialed her husband. It rang once, then clicked straight to voicemail. She tried again. This time he answered, calm, clipped, not tired, measured. "We need to talk," she said. A pause. Then, "My counsel is available Tuesdays and Thursdays. Pick a time. You don't have to do this." She pushed, voice cracking. "This doesn't have to turn nuclear." "Didn't turn," he said. "You lit it." She didn't hang up, just breathed into the silence, hoping he might throw her a lifeline, even a bitter one. Instead, he added, "And for what it's worth, your boyfriend should have read clause 14. "What clause?" She snapped too fast. But the line had already gone dead. She stood there in the middle of her apartment, phone in hand, heart thudding against her ribcage like a warning siren. Not because of what he'd said, but how he'd said it. Clause 14. There was a clause 14 in the prenup. She remembered vaguely something about reputational liability. She never read it. Never thought she'd need to. She was wrong. Now, the man who once bought her parents a mansion without blinking was treating her like a hostile merger. Because this wasn't just a divorce anymore. This was containment. Her boss, his text stopped. His LinkedIn went dark. His name no longer popped up on the firm's directory by week's end. Rumors began to circle. Leave of absence, pending inquiry, executive reassignment. She scrolled through them alone. No updates, no allies. The net she'd woven, built from charm, from confidence, from strategic affairs and clever pillow talk, was dissolving strand by strand. And at the center of it was a man she once called forgettable. Now she couldn't forget a single thing he said, especially the part where he'd warned her, "I protect what I build." Turns out he meant all of it. The mediation room was sterile in that perfectly curated corporate way. Glass walls, 2 white walls, polished table, carafe of filtered water nobody touched. It wasn't a courtroom, but it might as well have been. The gravity was the same, maybe worse. She came in with eyes blazing, hair done, expensive blouse, one shade too bright for a negotiation, lipstick like war paint. The confidence could be worn like armor. She'd layered it thick. From the first second, she pushed. "He used me," she said, leaning forward in her seat, voice sharpened for performance. "He manipulated everyone. My parents, my friends, even our lawyers. He staged all of this across the table." He didn't flinch. She wasn't looking at him anyway. She was playing to the mediator. A quiet woman in her 50s with a notepad and unreadable eyes. Not her audience of choice, but the only one that mattered now. "He let me believe the house was ours," she continued. "He created a false sense of security. I acted based on trust. That should matter." The mediator gave a small nod. "Then let's review the ownership documentation." She handed the file to the assistant. They pulled up the property deed history on screen. Her attorney shifted in her seat. 3 entries, all notarized, each one dated, spaced over the past year, each reaffirming the same point. She held no legal claim to the property, not as a spouse, not as trustee, not as power of attorney. Even worse, each reaffirmation was signed by her voluntarily, digitally time-stamped. No coercion, no legal pressure, just her own carelessness. Layered like bricks in a wall, now slamming back toward her. Her lawyer leaned in, whispering something. She didn't hear it. The mediator, still calm, clicked to the next page. "Additionally," she said, "we have a letter entered into record submitted by your husband's counsel and confirmed as authentic." The assistant passed over a printed page. Her mother's handwriting, she knew it instantly. "Dear," his name. We can never thank you enough for what you've done. You've restored our dignity after years of financial stress we never told our daughter about. This home isn't just a gift, it's a second chance at peace. Please don't ever feel unappreciated. You are family to us. With gratitude, her mother's name. No one spoke, not her attorney, not the mediator, not him, just her. A sound barely audible, a gasp that turned into a strangled breath. The kind you let out when you realized the person you once mocked for being too methodical had built an entire war chest beneath your feet while you were still counting your likes. She tried to speak, failed again. He was supposed to, her voice cracked. He was supposed to love me, not trap me like this. The mediator folded her hands. He didn't trap you. He documented you. She broke then. Not loudly, not dramatically. It was worse. A slow fold inward, shoulders caving, eyes blinking but unfocused. Like her own reflection was unrecognizable now. This version of herself reduced to paper cuts, each one dated, signed and unread. She reached for a tissue, missed. Her attorney stayed silent because there was nothing left to argue. The fire she brought, the accusations, the performance, the attempted moral high ground burned out under the weight of ink. Her strategy was outrage. His was receipts. And in a room like this, outrage doesn't win. Documentation does. The mediator looked at her calmly. You're welcome to propose a new settlement arrangement, but understand your leverage is exhausted. Tears don't change ownership. Emotion doesn't override contractual clarity. She had come here expecting a battle of narratives, but this wasn't a story anymore. It was evidence, and hers pointed in only one direction: collapse. The mansion was no longer referred to as theirs, not by the neighbors, not by the landscaper, not even by her mother, who now spoke of it as the property. On weekends, her parents no longer hosted friends for wine on the back terrace. They reviewed cleaning schedules, replied to Airbnb inquiries, and debated which photos best concealed the empty picture frames still hanging in the hallway. They'd stripped it of sentiment of story because the story had gotten them humiliated. Instead of an anniversary party, they updated the listing description to include heated pool and low-noise neighborhood. The master bedroom's walk-in closet, once her mother's pride, was now tagged as owner's locker locked. They said nothing to her, not when she messaged, not when she called. She could see the double checks. Reed ignored her mother, once so eager to defend her at family dinners, now reposted articles about generational consequences of entitlement. No one named names, but everyone knew. Across town, in a third floor, one-bedroom unit with peeling balcony paint and a water heater that coughed like a dying animal. She lay in bed most nights staring at the ceiling. No celebrations, no calls, just the slow march of time marked by the tap-tap of rain against a cracked window pane. The furniture was rented, the Wi-Fi spotty. She kept telling herself this was temporary, just a phase until she got back on her feet, found her next thing, rebranded the narrative. But every time she opened her inbox, the only new messages were promotional offers and never responded to LinkedIn applications she'd sent weeks ago. The one she tailored with all the right language: strategic communicator, adaptive thinker, cross-functional collaboration. No replies, not even rejection, just the dull echo of invisibility. Her former boss had stopped texting completely. After the compliance meeting and the leave of absence, he disappeared into legal fog. No Instagram updates, no cryptic stories, just an account that slowly faded until the algorithm forgot he existed. And when she emailed him just once, he replied with 6 words. This is no longer appropriate communication. She stared at those words for hours, then deleted them. From her tiny window, she could see the park across the street. On weekends, families passed beneath it. Kids on scooters, couples holding coffees and dogs and dreams. She once found too pedestrian. Now they looked enviable. She used to measure success by property lines and partner salaries. Now she measured it in decibels. The laughter outside was just out of reach. She didn't join it. She didn't belong to it. She simply watched it like a woman on the wrong side of glass. The mansion still standing, still perfect, still owned by a man who never once needed to scream, still booked solid through the summer. Every rental a reminder, every 5-star review, another brick in the monument of her mistake. She once called it a gift for their dignity. Now, it stood as proof of her own erasure because she hadn't just lost a house or a husband or a plan. She'd lost the script, and the silence that followed wasn't peaceful, it was permanent. 3 months passed, long enough for the headlines to quiet the lawyers to vanish back into their private elevators, and for her name to slip beneath the surface of gossip she once thrived in. She was back at her temp job, manning a reception desk that didn't even face the lobby when the letter arrived. Plain envelope, no branding, no stamp markings, just slid beneath her apartment door sometime between her morning cereal and her 11 a.m. cigarette. She swore she'd quit. She opened it casually. Inside a photograph, her parents, standing stiffly in front of the mansion, not smiling, posed, her mother's hands folded like she was at a funeral, her father wearing the same strange expression he used to reserve for tax season. And behind them, centered perfectly in the frame, was him, her ex-husband, standing on the porch, not gloating, just there, present, like the house itself had chosen its rightful inhabitant. On the back of the photo, written in black ink, clean print, "Next time, build something you're willing to protect." No signature, no address, no threat, just finality. That same afternoon, a notice hit the public property ledger. A routine update most people would never see, but she had alerts set. She saw it within minutes. The mansion was no longer held under his name. It had been transferred, not sold, not gifted, reassigned to a newly formed entity, the Riddickworth Foundation. Its mission: support single fathers pursuing business education, access to seed funding, and mentorship in tech. She looked deeper. He was listed as chairman. She blinked. Read it again. Chairman, not owner, not vindictive ex-chairman because he hadn't just moved on. He'd built again, reinvested the very structure she tried to weaponize into a tool for men like him. Quiet builders, overlooked founders, dads who were told, "You'll figure it out," and never asked for help because they assumed no one would give it. The foundation had already made 3 micro grants. She found the site simple, clean, a testimonial from a 31-year-old dad who'd lost everything in a custody battle and rebuilt a design agency from his garage. Thanking Riddickworth, thanking the anonymous benefactor who turned pain into structure. She stared at the screen and for the first time felt small, not pitied, not hated, irrelevant. Because he hadn't just won, he erased her from the victory. She wasn't the reason he built the foundation. She was the debris it was built over. And the most cruel part, she couldn't even spin it, couldn't call it spite, couldn't make it about revenge because it wasn't. He didn't flaunt it. He didn't leak it to friends. He didn't post cryptic status updates. He just moved the title, moved the mission, and moved on. He'd left her the perfect parting gift, an empire of silence wrapped in legacy. She held the photo in her hands for hours that night, not crying, not throwing it, just holding it because there was nothing left to say. The man she tried to reduce, underestimate, repackage into a soft landing had already rebuilt his world.